大家好，这里是听广播学英语频道。今天我们来关注一种有趣的海洋生物——神奇的海蛞蝓。麦迪萨法亚在短波节目中介绍了裸鳃目这个迷人的海蛞蝓群体，它们拥有非凡的能力。有些裸鳃目可以吸收光合作用的能量，在消化腺中存储光合藻类；另一些则可以从有毒的捕食者，如水母，身上窃取刺丝胞，作为自我防卫的武器。好了，我们来听广播吧。
Hey everyone, Emily Kwong here with a favorite episode from our beloved founding host, Maddie Safaya.
What's up, Deuterino?
Hey.
Today, I've got a brand nudie one for you. My last reported episode on some of the most magical invertebrates in the animal kingdom. Can you guess?
With you, it could be anything. It just needs to be maximally slimy and gross. Am I close?
Closer than I want you to be, honestly. I don't like that. But yes, we are talking about sea slugs. Specifically, one big group of sea slugs called nudibranchs, or nudies, if you will. I didn't make it up. If you haven't seen one before, Emily, Google nudibranch. These will actually blow your mind. Here's one of the scientists I talked to, Ryan Hewlett, straight up nerding out about them.
Like when I think of these colorations and these patterns, like you have polka dots, you have stripes, you have, all shades of colors that I just don't see that often in other animals. Like, honestly, when I think of very beautiful animals, I think of nudibranchs.
Wow, what an endorsement. All right, I'm looking these up.
Look them up.
Nudibranchs. Oh, wow.
Right?
These are some gorgeous Technicolor slugs?
Yep.
Is that what I'm looking at?
Right, yes.
I mean, this purple one looks like it's going to a rave.
They might be. And here's the thing. They aren't just out here looking pretty either.
I do think of them as having superpowers. And I think of, some of the classical X-Men characters who, are able to steal other people's superpowers.
So, Emily, some nudibranchs essentially have the ability to do that, eating up organisms from their environment and using their abilities for themselves.
You mean absorbing the power of your prey and using it for yourself?
Yes.
I am so here for this. Let's go.
So today on the show, we dive into the incredible world of nudibranchs. Some that have evolved to harness the power of photosynthesis, others that can steal stinging cells from venomous predators and use them for their own defense. It's going to be a solar-powered, sting-stealing slug show.
This is classic Maddie Safaya reporting. You are listening to ShortWave, the science podcast from NPR. All right, Maddie Safaya, You're taking us on a sea slug odyssey today. Where do we start?
Okay, so like I said, today we're focusing on nudibranchs, a particularly charismatic group of sea slugs. They are remarkably diverse. They live in every ocean and most marine habitats. There are more than 3,000 different species of them worldwide. And Emily, people are really into them. Do you remember Ryan from earlier?
Yeah, he was pretty hyped on them.
Yeah, so he's a PhD student at Harvard studying evolutionary biology. But before Harvard, he did his master's studying nudibranchs. And once you love nudibranchs, you don't just stop loving nudibranchs.
I live the passion every day, even though I've been working on other weird critters.
Live in the passion, the nudibranch passion. He says that some scientists who study nudibranchs actually call themselves nerdibranchs. And I love that.
When the fandom has a name, you know the passion is real.
And I'll be honest, Emily, I was initially drawn to them because some of them are so cool looking. But for me, the amazing thing about nudibranchs is how they harness the powers of other organisms around them. And that's what I want to talk to you about today.
Yeah, this honestly fascinates me. Okay, so earlier you said some of these sea slugs have the ability to co-opt photosynthesis, the process of using light to make food. I know that plants, algae, and some bacteria do this, but I've never heard of an animal doing that. How does that even work?
Okay, so you're already on the right track. The key for nudibranchs is something you just mentioned, algae that use photosynthesis to make food, aka photosynthetic algae. Quite a few nudibranchs can do this, but let's walk through one particularly cool example. So, there's a nudibranch called Phylodesmium longicerum. These nudibranchs feed on corals, and hanging out inside those corals are photosynthetic algae.
kind of this like mutualistic relationship where coral's giving them like a nice habitat to kind of hang out in, and the algae are providing them sort of with like nutrients and things like that.
So when the nudibranchs eat up those corals, they end up eating that algae too. Now, instead of just like eating all the algae and excreting it, the nudibranch stores some of those algae in their digestive gland. And their digestive gland isn't like just in the belly of the slug like our human intestines. They actually kind of extend up into these finger-like projections called serrata that grow and stretch out from the main body of the slug.
And what is interesting is that most of the time this tissue or this like projection is fairly transparent. And because of that transparency, like light is able to enter and actually sort of, hit those algal cells, and the algae are able to do what they do really well, and is to photosynthesize.
Whoa. Yeah. So the algae just kind of hang out inside the digestive gland of the nudibranch, making food, using light, and producing nutrients the nudibranchs can use.
Let me get this right. So nudi eat the algae.
Yep.
Some of the algae survive and get stored inside the digestive gland.
Yeah.
And they just keep photosynthesizing.
Yeah. And in Longicerum, the slug that we've been talking about, it is especially good at this. They've evolved these like really big paddle-like serrata, and so they can house these really well-established, thriving communities of algae inside them, hooking up these nudibranchs with nutrients.
They're essentially farming these algae inside of their bodies. That's incredible.
Yes, that is how scientists actually describe it. So they really rely on these algae. I mean, scientists have actually starved these nudibranchs for weeks or several months, and they can survive just on the nutrients from the algae. It's a beautiful piece of symbiosis, in my opinion.
It is beyond. I mean, could you imagine if we could do this?
Right?
Like you're running late, no time to eat. I'll just rely on my body's solar power.
It's perfect. It's perfect for us.
For the gal on the go, you really just like getting that. Harnessing those algal powers.
Just a solar-powered gal on the go, Emily.
I want this for the future. Okay, so that's the solar-powered nudibranchs.
Yes.
You've also mentioned that some nudibranchs can steal stinging cells from animals like jellyfish.
Yeah, so I talked to Jessica Goodhart about this. She's a postdoc at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. And I think it's also fair to call her a nudibranch.
It is the most exciting thing I could have imagined doing when I was an undergrad. I never even could have possibly imagined studying something like this. And they're just cool, ultimately.
What a nudibranch.
Yeah. And Jessica's whole thing is studying how nudibranchs steal parts of a venom-filled stinging cell from other animals by eating them. And these nudibranchs eat some pretty gnarly animals.
So this includes things like jellyfish. It can also include things like Portuguese manowar, which are a different kind of cnidarian. There's also anemones, things like hydroids, if you're familiar with those.
They don't play.
Right? And all of those animals have the capacity to fire these little harpoon-like structures called nematocysts. And nematocysts are, scientifically speaking, pretty metal. Like, say you poke a little jellyfish, for example.
What happens is if you touch the tentacles, these structures fire as if they are a harpoon into the tissues of, the other organism. And what happens usually is that there's venom that's released. That's a mix of a variety of toxins and can cause really severe damage. So this is what most people associate with jellyfish stings.
These nematocysts are what the nudibranchs steal.
Oh. Mm-hmm. And you said they get them by eating the jellyfish?
Yes.
Or whatever?
Right.
Right? So how does the nudibranch not get stung to death as they try to eat them and, harvest their harpoons?
Right. So it seems like a few things are protecting the nudie throughout this process.
They use the mucus that they have or that they generate outside their bodies to basically prevent some of the nematocysts from firing.
Now, I should say that some of those little stingy harpoons do fire, but the nudibranchs have this little cuticle in what is essentially their throat that protects them from those. And so essentially they just poop out those little fire nematocysts.
Wow. A shield of mucus and a gut of steel. This is real superhero behavior.
I know it. So they poop out the ones that are fired, but there are some that don't fire. Either those prevented from firing, like we talked about.
Yeah, #mucus.
Or potentially something even cooler. Jessica says it's possible that some nematocysts that make their way into the slug are kind of like underdeveloped. They're not like quite grown-up harpoons yet.
And there is some evidence to suggest that what basically happens is that the nematocysts are maturing inside of the nudibranch. So the nudibranchs are able to create an environment that allow the nematocysts to essentially be prepared to fire. But we don't know for sure that that's 100% happening.
I can't with these creatures. Okay, so where do the slugs then put the little harpoons that they steal?
Okay, remember the serrata from the other nudibranchs we talked about?
Oh, yeah, those like finger-like projections that kind of come off the body of the slug.
Yeah, so these nudibranchs have serrata too, and the unfired nematocysts make their way up there. At the very tip of those appendages is something called the cnidosac.
And what essentially it is it's just it's a sac. It's a muscular sac that has a bunch of cells that are the ones taking up the nematocysts.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
So let's say a little fishy comes along, maybe looking for a snack.
Basically, the cnidosacs, squeeze their muscular structures, so the muscles are squeezed and the nematocysts are released. And so the fish basically gets a mouthful of stings. And, if you were a fish, you might not be that excited about that.
Nudibranchs are incredible, Maddie.
I know. I think we should start saying dudibranch, instead of deuterinos. Think about it.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, if you could pick one of these superpowers, which would it be? The ability to harness photosynthesis from algae or the power of a jellyfish sting?
I mean, no, not even a question. I would go the photosynthesis route. I love a good symbiotic relationship. Kind of reminds me of us, in a way, of the whole ShortWave team, leaning on each other to make it through the tough stuff, protecting each other from the elements, providing each other food when one of us forgot to eat. We've done that. That's real.
I will be your symbiotic slug algae any day. All right, Dudibranch. Well, that's the show for today. This episode was produced by Britt Hansen, edited by Viet Le, and fact-checked by Indy Kara. This is ShortWave, the science podcast from NPR.